In 1939, a machine descended on Poland with wings like a vulture and a scream straight out of a nightmare. It wasn't just a bomber, it was a weapon of psychological annihilation. Welcome to Historical Digs, where today we uncover the story behind the Ju-87 Stuka, an aircraft whose mere sound could collapse battle lines, but behind that bark lay a fatal contradiction. The engineered terror. What if terror could be engineered not through propaganda, but through physics? In 1935, as Germany's reborn Luftwaffe skirted Versailles Treaty restrictions, Hermann Pohlmann, working under Junkers, was tasked with designing a precision dive bomber. What emerged would become a tool not just of destruction, but of terror. And thus the Junkers Ju-87 Stuka was born. By weaponizing sound itself, Germany's newest bomber successfully transformed aerodynamics into psychological warfare. The Stuka had a jarring silhouette. Its inverted gull wings gave it a crooked, vulture-like appearance, but this strange shape was born from ruthless pragmatism. Shortened landing gear saved weight and strengthened struts for primitive frontline airstrips, yet this iconic shape concentrated stress at the wing roots. Reinforced joints using duralumin helped manage the stress. Every gram was contested. Facing scarce aluminum reserves, Pohlmann's team shaved every possible gram of weight. They simplified the cockpit, used minimal instruments, and designed the cockpit for essential functions only, avoiding weighty luxuries. Drag reduction bordered on fanaticism. Engineers clad the fixed landing gear in teardrop-shaped fairings called trousers, smoothing turbulent airflow at 350 km per hour. The perforated dive brakes that flipped outward beneath the wings functioned as gravity's parachutes, slowing the Stuka's descent just enough for precise aim. But the masterpiece of macabre innovation lay in acoustics. The Jericho Trompeta, or Jericho Trumpet, emerged. Twin 0.8-meter sirens mounted on the landing gear legs. During the Stuka's near-vertical dive, wind rushing past the landing gear spun these small propellers, unleashing a terrifying high-pitched wail that grew louder and more intense as the plane plunged. The sound was audible for miles and could shatter the nerves of soldiers on the ground. Luftwaffe strategists studying World War I accounts of soldiers breaking under artillery barrages exploited primal neurology. Historian Richard Overy noted this weaponized a primal reflex, the scream of a predator descending from above. Before we dive deeper into the Stuka story, hit that like button and subscribe to Historical Digs. Your support helps us unearth the untold stories of aviation's most battle-hardened war machines. Yet terror extracted brutal trade-offs. Wind tunnel tests confirm the sirens generated 8% more drag, capping speed at around 240 miles per hour, slower than some pre-war airliners. Armor was deemed prohibitive. Pilots felt dangerously exposed. With no armor to speak of, they knew a single well-aimed rifle bullet from the ground could be fatal. Even the automatic dive recovery system, designed to save pilots from G-force blackout, added 34 kilograms of clockwork mechanisms prone to jamming. By 1937, frontline evaluations revealed an unexpected casualty: the Stuka's own crews. The siren screech vibrated through the airframe, rattling instrument panels and contributing to crew fatigue and disorientation. Ground crews coined the nickname Heulender Teufel, which translates to howling devil, a label propagandists adored but which betrayed the machine's grim duality. The Stuka emerged as a paradox, a precision instrument forged for psychological dominance, yet so fragile its designers knew its time in the spotlight would be brief. Its scream echoed not as a battle cry, but as a swan song, one destined to linger longest not over battlefields, but in the nightmares of those who heard it. Blitzkrieg's hammer, precision and panic. Dawn, September 1, 1939, as German panzers surged across the Polish frontier near Wielunia, a new sound shredded the morning calm, a rising, oscillating shriek that seemed to tear the sky itself. The Junkers Ju-87 Stuka's debut wasn't merely an attack, it was a calculated sensory assault, blending psychological terror with surgical destruction. Within minutes, 9 Stukas reportedly struck the town's exchange, junction, and artillery positions, severing communications before Polish defenses could mobilize. This precision, unprecedented in aerial warfare, transformed the Stuka into Blitzkrieg's scalpel. The mechanics of terror relied on cold physics. Approaching targets from high altitude, pilots would tip their planes over into a terrifying near-vertical dive, accelerating past 310 miles per hour. At around 5,000 feet, pilots released their bombs, and an automatic system helped pull the aircraft out of the dive. The Luftwaffen 3 bomb sight, aligned with a pilot's eyepiece, was capable of striking within 30 meters under ideal conditions, a feat unthinkable for level bombers. Luftwaffe training manuals emphasized that the dive is the weapon, turning gravity into a targeting system. At the destroyed Dirschau Bridge, observers noted that each support pillar had suffered a direct hit with almost impossible precision. But the Jericho Trompeta sirens amplified destruction into demoralization. Some accounts describe cavalry horses panicking at the sound, throwing riders before explosions echoed. One report described AA gunners near Radom abandoning their posts as Stuka circled, drawing out the sirens. This tactic, codenamed Terrorangriff or terror attack, exploited a neurological vulnerability studied by Luftwaffe psychologists. Sustained high-frequency noise triggers primal fight-or-flight responses. The Stuka's early dominance masked fragility. In Poland, 31 Ju-87s were lost, mostly to ground fire during low-level strafing runs. With Polish air power crippled, vulnerabilities mattered less than psychological dividends. Pilots exploited the Stuka's slow speed, 190 miles per hour at attack altitude, to adjust dives with unnerving patience. Luftflotte 1 commander Albert Kesselring reportedly described it as bombing as craft, not chance. France, May 1940, revealed the Stuka's apex. At Sedan, 300 sorties in 48 hours shattered French artillery along the Meuse, enabling Guderian's panzers to cross unimpeded. French officers described how Stukas plucked gun emplacements one by one, like a hawk selecting mice. Precision bordered on cruelty. Near Dunkirk, Ju-87s sank the destroyer Grenade with a bomb down its smokestack, a hit requiring millimeter-perfect timing. Yet success birthed complacency. During the Dunkirk evacuation, RAF Hurricanes exploited the Stuka's Achilles heel, its agonizing 4-minute climb from dive altitude to safety. On May 29, 1940, 7 Ju-87s fell in 12 minutes near Calais. Post-mission debriefs noted rear gunners were simply overwhelmed by multiple attackers, but the Luftwaffe High Command dismissed the mounting losses as acceptable. Wolfram von Richthofen's diary hailed the Stuka as our scalpel in a war of sledgehammers. The myth held, but the blade had notched. The flaw exposed. The English Channel offered a brutal correction. By August 1940, as the Battle of Britain raged, the Stuka Scream transformed from an instrument of terror into a lethal liability, a sonic bullseye painting the sky for Supermarine Spitfires. Designed for uncontested skies, the Ju-87 now flew into a storm of interceptors that outclimbed it by 75%, outdived it by 100 miles per hour, and outgunned it with 8.303 Brownings against a single rear-mounted MG-15. The Stuka's fundamental weakness, obscured by Blitzkrieg's early dominance, now crystallized. It could not survive where it could not intimidate. Statistics chronicled the reckoning. Between July 10 and August 18, 1940, Stuka Geschwader 77 alone lost 59 aircraft, a catastrophic 29% of its strength. The causes were ruthlessly aerodynamic. Laden with a 500-kilogram bomb, the Ju-87B managed a maximum speed of 210 miles per hour at 4,000 meters, over 120 miles per hour slower than a Spitfire Mark I at the same altitude. Its climb rate, burdened by dive brakes and sirens, stalled at 4.5 meters per second versus the Spitfire's 13 meters per second. Rear gunners, cramped in open cockpits with minimal traverse, faced near-impossible deflection shots against diving attackers. RAF pilots refined a kill formula: dive, one burst, climb. They ambushed Stukas during their most vulnerable phase, in the critical moments after bomb release when pilots wrestled gravity and G-forces to regain altitude. Squadron leader John Dundas of No. 609 Squadron was one of them. In a combat report, he reportedly described them as hanging like sodden paper bags after their dives. On August 13th, Adlertag or Eagle Day, 18 Ju-87s fell in a single morning over Portland Harbor, many to Spitfires exploiting this exact tactic. Germany's response revealed a dangerous denial. Instead of retiring the Stuka, engineers bolted on 8mm armor plates and self-sealing fuel tanks. The extra weight further degraded the plane's already poor climb performance. The Ju-87R long-range variant, designed for Norwegian fjords and Mediterranean sorties, now carried more fuel than bombs, reducing crews to armed observers. Even the dreaded sirens vanished from frontline units by September 1940. The 8% drag penalty outweighed psychological impact against disciplined RAF pilots. A temporary Eastern Front reprieve in 1941 masked the crisis. Against unprepared Soviet air forces during Barbarossa, Stukas regained predatory swagger, destroying over 2,000 tanks by year's end. But as Soviet factories ramped up production of Lag-3 fighters, clumsy but heavily armed, losses mounted. By December 1941, the average Ju-87D survived just 15 combat sorties, half its 1940 lifespan. Soviet pilots exploited the Stuka's ventral blind spot, where the rear gunner's MG-15 couldn't depress below +15 degrees. Ground troops coined a grimly poetic nickname, the Flying Typewriter, for its rhythmic, rattling engine note preceding attacks, a punchline delivered between flak bursts. The Eastern Front exposed a deeper rot, the Luftwaffe's failure to adapt tactics. Veteran Stuka pilots still flew tight formations, inviting Soviet fighters to concentrate fire. The Luftwaffe's tactical doctrine remained rigid. Suggestions from veteran pilots to break from tight formations into more flexible pairs were often rejected for not adhering to standard procedure. The Stuka's wings, stressed for 7.5 Gs in dives, now shuddered under evasive maneuvers, a flaw Soviet pilots exploited by forcing abrupt pullouts. The myth of invincibility had shattered, and the sky was more unforgiving than ever. The Vulture's last stand. By 1943, the Stuka was a ghost, banished from skies ruled by modern fighters. Yet on the blood-soaked plains of the Eastern Front, the Luftwaffe's high command gave the dying Vulture a final, savage purpose. The Blitzkrieg was over. The war of attrition had begun, and its god was the Soviet T-34 tank. In a desperate act of battlefield engineering, the Stuka underwent a grotesque metamorphosis. It shed its identity as a dive bomber to become the Junker's Ju-87G Gustav, a flying anti-tank cannon. This was no elegant evolution, it was a crude necessity. Engineers ripped the dive brakes from the wings, they were useless now, and bolted on two enormous 37mm Bordkanone BK 3.7 cannons, one under each wing. Adapted from the Army's Flak 18 anti-aircraft gun, these weapons were heavy, slow-firing brutes. Each cannon pod weighed over 200 kilograms and carried a magazine of just 12 tungsten core shells. The added weight made the already slow Stuka a clumsy, unwieldy nightmare to fly. Some pilots reported that the recoil disrupted aim so violently it felt as if the airframe might tear apart. Flying the Gustav was a new kind of terror, this time for the pilot. To be effective, they had to abandon the safety of altitude and fly low and slow, lining up on targets just meters above the ground. This made them lethally vulnerable to small arms fire, anti-aircraft guns, and any Soviet fighter that happened upon them. The new role demanded a unique combination of skill, courage, and fatalism. In the hands of an average pilot, the Ju-87G was a death trap, but in the hands of a master, it was a tank killer. No pilot mastered this beast like Hans Ulrich Rudel. He pioneered the tactic of attacking Soviet tanks from the rear or the top where their armor was thinnest. A single 37mm shell striking a T-34's engine deck could set it ablaze. Rudel turned this brutal calculus into an art form, eventually credited with over 500 Soviet tanks destroyed, a record unlikely ever to be matched. But his legendary success was the exception that proves the rule. For every Rudel, dozens of other Stuka crews were swatted from the sky, their slow-moving aircraft easy prey. Ultimately, the Gustav was a stopgap, a last gasp from a dying design. By 1944, far superior ground attack aircraft like the Focke-Wulf FW-190, which could carry bombs and cannons while still defending itself, were entering service. In September 1944, after nearly a decade of continuous production, the assembly lines for the Ju-87 finally fell silent. The remaining Gustavs fought on until the final bitter days of the war in 1945, many flown by young pilots with minimal training. Today, the Stuka's physical legacy is scarce. Fewer than a half-dozen original airframes survive in museums in London, Chicago, and Germany. Their bent wings and spatted undercarriages a silent testament to a bygone era of warfare. But its true legacy is not one of metal, but of memory. The shriek of the Jericho trumpet became the definitive sound of German air power, a piece of psychological warfare so effective that it is still used in Hollywood films to signal impending doom. The Ju-87 Stuka was an aircraft built for a specific type of war, a short, sharp, terrifying Blitzkrieg. It was a masterpiece of specialized design that achieved legendary success, but when the war changed, it could not. So what do you think? Was the Stuka a surgical scalpel, or a hammer that shattered when the world refused to break? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you like this video, check out some of our other digs, and subscribe and ring the bell for our next dive into aviation's unsung heroes. Until then, remember, history is full of hidden gems if you know where to dig.